people getting shot, reporters burning alive.
Disaster.
A few things you probably never thought could happen on live TV, but they actually did. Sometimes, while broadcasting to millions, television stations capture something they weren't supposed to see. Like that one time 4 former US presidents got a mystery envelope at a funeral. What's in the envelopes? On the 5th of December, 2018, a group of former US presidents gathered at the funeral of America's 41st president in Texas. The event was broadcast live on TV, and there you can see some of these former presidents and politicians holding what appears to be envelopes. However, it wasn't the envelope alone that caught people's attention, but the reaction of everyone who got one. Hillary Clinton, for example, looked really pissed after she apparently read the content of the envelope. Barack and Michelle Obama's reaction was quite different. As you can see, the former First Lady acting shocked and maybe a little horrified as she tried to hide the envelope. Even the Bushes got one, and you can see how obviously uncomfortable they looked seconds after reading what was written inside. However, no one has ever been able to figure out what was written on these envelopes. Because millions of people tuned in to watch the funeral, the story soon became a media sensation, and conspiracy theories had a field day spinning several tales about it. It's been almost 6 years since then, though, and the content of those envelopes still remains an unsolved mystery. Is it the worst thing that's ever been caught on live TV, though? Probably not. A good contender for that position would be that one time a man with a gun took a reporter hostage in front of millions of viewers. Gunman takes TV reporter hostage. When reporter David Horowitz came into work on August 1987, he probably never thought he'd have a gun pointed at him just hours later. It all began with a man named Gary Stallman, whose father, Max Stallman, was a former KNBC pharmaceutical reporter. Although it wasn't unusual for guests to be present on the set during broadcasts, Gary wasn't just there for a visit. As Horowitz and 2 other presenters were in the middle of the daily scheduled program, he suddenly felt a gun pressed, and when he looked back, he saw Gary holding a note and telling him, "Read this or I will shoot you."
Folks, we have someone on the set who's standing here and would like me to read.
Shocked but maintaining composure, Horowitz asked the young man what his name was and what he wanted.
You want to tell me your name or not? What is it? And Gary, where are you from?
It was at this moment that Gary then identified himself before the camera. Speaking calmly, Horowitz put on his spectacles before proceeding to read the note. But just before he started, KNBC News director Tom Capra ordered the program to cut off the air. 7 minutes later, the broadcast returned with an explanation of what had happened. In the note, Gary talked about how his father had been cloned by the CIA and alien forces as part of a greater plot to overthrow the United States government and possibly the human race itself. The rest of the note simply contained other rants about the CIA and their secret mental hospitals, with Gary demanding the release of secret Air Force files concerning UFOs. But despite the weird claims made in the note, Horowitz read everything with all forms of seriousness. As he read the last line, though, Gary punctuated it by saying, "Thank you, David. I couldn't have harmed anyone with this unloaded BB gun." He then put the pistol down on the table before the police swarmed in to take him in. His father, Max, would later reveal that Gary was suffering from several mental disorders and had been hospitalized a couple of times. But despite the fact that the gun was a mere plastic toy, Gary was still charged by the cops. Thankfully, Horowitz escaped the situation without getting hurt, unlike these unlucky tourists who got shot after a hostage situation went horribly wrong. The Manila hostage situation. After getting fired from the police force, Rolando Mendoza hatched a crazy plan to get his job back, hijack a bus, and force the government to reinstate him, or he commits a mass murder. So on the morning of August 23, 2010, Mendoza walked into a Hong Thai Travel Services tour bus, taking tourists around the city of Manila, asking for a free ride. The only problem was that he was holding a weapon and was clearly looking for trouble. After the driver declined his request, Mendoza handcuffed him to the steering wheel and hijacked the bus. This was the beginning of one of the worst hostage situations in the history of the Philippines, and it was all broadcast on live TV. Because most of the people on the bus were tourists from Hong Kong, the situation soon caught international attention. Mendoza's request was simple: reinstate him back to the force and he would walk out in handcuffs. However, it wasn't really that simple. Although he would later release a few hostages, including a woman with 2 children and a 12-year-old boy, Mendoza kept most of the hostages as leverage for his negotiation. Around 2 p.m., the former cop posted several several notes on the windows which stated, "A big mistake to correct, a big wrong decision. Big deal will start after 3 p.m. today." You see, because the situation was being broadcast live on the news, Mendoza could watch how the media was painting him in a negative light, and he wanted to change that perspective. This was why he requested for a TV interview by 3 p.m. so he could address the nation himself. However, just before the deadline, a young man appeared on the scene, walking towards where the bus was parked. Police soon caught up to the man, who was immediately recognized as Mendoza's brother. At first, they thought he was trying to talk his brother into surrendering, but after finding a gun on him as well, they decided to take him in. He was eventually able to convince his brother to shift the 3 p.m. deadline forward. However, shortly after sundown, the Office of the Ombudsman sent a letter to the man informing him that an investigation would be conducted into his case, but never agreeing to his demands. As for the interview he requested, Mendoza was later able to speak with the DZXL radio station, all while the SWAT team were trying to breach the bus and put an end to all of this. While all of this was going on, the police decided to place his brother under arrest for coming to a hostage situation with a gun, and since the press was covering the entire scene, Mendoza could see this on the news. Seeing his brother get roughed up by the cops got him so mad that he started shooting the hostages. At around 7:30 p.m., the bus driver Alberto Lubang managed to get out of his handcuffs and escape the bus. Believing that all the hostages were dead, the SWAT team tried taking the bus but failed horribly. After hours of trying, snipers eventually got a clear shot of Mendoza and quickly took him out. Surprisingly though, a few hostages were found alive with some sustaining serious injuries. Speaking of injuries, ever heard of the British reporter who almost got burned alive on live TV? Anthia Turner on fire. The year was 1989, and BBC was hosting a children's show called Up to You, featuring a motorcycle display team. Anthia Turner, a reporter on the show, was sitting on the tailgate of the van introducing the stunt when a miscommunication led to the motorbike bursting out of the back, while the pyrotechnics was also lit at the same time. With all of these happening at the very same moment, Anthia wasn't able to get out of the way in time, and she immediately caught on fire on live TV. Of course, we can't show the gruesome details due to YouTube rules, but in the original video, you can see her fall to the floor, with her hair and jacket burning. Millions of people watching the show at the time saw this happen live, right until the channel decided to cut off the broadcast. In an interview after the incident, Anthia explained how the production team had misread the cue for her to speak, and instead lit up the pyrotechnic and sent the stunt bike out that same moment. She ended up suffering serious injuries to her hands and other parts of her body, but thankfully she made it out alive, sued the BBC, got a big bag, and went on to become an icon of television. What's crazier than burning on live TV? Probably watching a person literally explode. The collar bomb case. Around 1:30 p.m. on August 28, 2003, a pizza delivery man named Brian Douglas Wells got an order to deliver 2 pizzas to the transmitting tower of a local TV station named WC-TV. Upon arriving at the tower, he was greeted by 4 strangers who held him at gunpoint and forced him to wear a collar bomb. He was then handed a homemade shotgun along with a handwritten note directing him to go rob a bank. Left with no choice, Wells headed to the PNC Bank on Peach Street and handed the note to the teller, stating that the bomb would explode in 15 minutes if he didn't get $250,000. Unfortunately, the teller wasn't able to access the vault and instead gave Wells $8,702 so he could just leave. Around 2:38 p.m., a witness called 911 to report a male leaving the bank with a bomb or something wrapped around his neck. This was the first time the cops got to know about the incident. 15 minutes after Wells left the bank, he was caught by the cops, handcuffed, and left sitting on the ground in the parking lot while they waited for the bomb squad to arrive. At this point, several news stations had arrived on the scene, broadcasting the whole situation to millions of people. Sadly, just 3 minutes before the bomb squad arrived, the bomb detonated while the cameras were right on Wells, with millions of people watching. The 4 perpetrators were later identified and arrested. However, murders aren't the only disturbing scenes caught on live TV. Sometimes it's weird things like a satanic ritual. News station hacked. This Australian TV station was in the middle of its nightly news when it accidentally switched to what looked like a satanic temple. The news station, known as ABC TV or Australian Broadcasting Corporation, was running a segment on dog welfare, showing men in suits standing outside a building. Suddenly, the broadcast cut to a visual of 3 people dressed in black and standing beside a brightly lit, upside-down cross. As one of them loudly proclaims the worship of Satan, the clip cuts back to the presenter in the studio, who also looked really confused. What was this clip? How did it get on live TV? And why did the station just broadcast a satanic ritual to the entire country? These questions remain unanswered by the station, however. Some believe the clip was from another broadcast scheduled for later. While this was definitely creepy, it's definitely not as wild as that one time someone got murdered on the BBC. Albert Dryden, live TV murder. On June 20th, 1991, BBC aired an episode of its Look North news programme, showing workers from the Derwentside District Council trying to demolish the home of a man named Albert Dryden. Albert had constructed the building without getting the proper permits, and for most viewers, this was supposed to be another regular broadcast. Moments before things went horribly wrong, Albert can be seen holding a gun, while the council officer tried to reason with him. Seconds later, a shot rang out, and everyone scattered, running for their lives without looking back. One reporter would later inform the viewers that Albert had shot the council worker in his chest, shot him in the hand, and fired at some of the police officers present. This marked the beginning of a long standoff that eventually ended in his arrest hours later. His house was later demolished, and Albert himself ended up in prison before he was released in 2017 after suffering a stroke. He died in a residential care home about a year later. You've seen people get shot on live TV, but how about someone shooting themselves? Christine Chubbuck's final moments. On the morning of July 15, 1974, Christine Chubbuck arrived at Channel 40, the local Florida TV station where she worked in good spirits. The program of the day started as scheduled. However, a few minutes after the commencement of the program, the team had a technical setback when the pre-recorded VT failed to roll. This created a moment of dead air until Chubbuck continued with her script saying, "In keeping with the company's policy of bringing you the trending news in blood and gore and in living color, you will be seeing one-of-a-kind live attempt Sui." She then brought out a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver from her bag and shot herself behind the right ear. Thousands of viewers watching the news witnessed her take her own life on her, just like she promised. Later reports revealed that she had been suffering from depression and had been lamenting about this situation to her family and friends, even joking about taking her own life. She even tried talking to a psychiatrist, but was never able to overcome her depression no matter how hard she tried. Unfortunately, thousands of people watching that day were forced to witness her finally give up the ghost. Speaking of ghosts, ever heard of the TV presenters who got an uninvited guest on live TV? The strange moving glass. Live shows on TV attract a large number of audiences, which means any strange occurrences that happen during the show are seen by thousands or even millions. Just like this bizarre incident which happened during a TV broadcast, where a stationary glass started to move across the table in front of the presenters without any external force. This strange incident occurred as Carlos Manila was presenting the morning news on a Telesaber channel program called Primera Edición, or First Edition. After seeing the moving glass, he quickly called the attention of his colleague, Pablo Zapata, who was busy attending to a message from a viewer. With a look of shock on his face, Carlos kept questioning if he saw the glass move as well. Initially, his colleague didn't take him seriously, believing he was trying to scare him or crack a weird joke. However, Carlos was sure of what he saw, but couldn't figure out what could have moved the glass. Was it a ghost, a trick by the producers, or was he tripping? Nobody still knows why the glass moves till today, and Carlos is probably still spooked out by what he saw. Not every uninvited TV guest is a ghost though. Some just come armed and dangerous. Shaquille Brewster confrontation. On this fateful day, Shaquille Brewster was reporting a live MSNBC shot from Gulfport when a white pickup truck was seen pulling over a distance away behind him. Suddenly, a man jumped out of the truck and started running in his direction. Because he didn't want to ruin the broadcast, Brewster had to change his position so the man could clearly be cut off from the camera. However, a few moments later, this same man got in Brewster's face, shouting at him to give a precise and accurate report. Because of this, the reporter had to calmly end the report immediately. Craig Melvin, a colleague who was also on the scene, could be heard calling the man to control himself while also checking to see if Brewster was harmed. Few moments later, Brewster made a tweet confirming that he was okay. Brewster would later be praised for how calmly he handled the situation without causing a scene. As for the man, he was later arrested and charged. Before we go on, here's our subscribers' pick for today. You won't believe this happened on live TV, but it actually did. While broadcasting a live game to millions of people, the camera accidentally panned to a couple in a corner of the stadium, and let's just say it captured a scene that shouldn't have been captured. The clip has since been scrapped from the internet. However, all we have left as evidence that it actually happened is this photograph. As always, share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Now let's get back to the video. The woman at the airport. During a live report by the Danish television network TV2, a woman was seen vanishing into thin air on live TV. The clip of this broadcast was later uploaded to YouTube by late-night talk show Natoldet. There you can see the woman standing by a baggage carousel before she then disappeared after another woman with a trolley walked in front of her. But how did she suddenly vanish? Where did she go? It turns out the man being interviewed was the coach of the national women's handball head, Klavs Brun Jørgensen, while the woman in question was handball expert Trine Jensen. A lot of people on the internet couldn't believe what they saw in the video. Some claimed it was magic, others believed it was some sort of time travel, while some even claimed that the woman was probably a ghost. However, according to Mashable, there's definitely an explanation for the video. After a close examination of the video, it turns out that the woman had actually walked away from her initial spot at just the perfect time, making it look like she disappeared. Moments later, the woman can actually be seen walking behind the woman moving the trolley. Sure, this video is still pretty weird, just like when a reporter almost got crushed by a car on live TV. Alex Savage's lucky escape. On this beautiful Tuesday morning, Alex Savage, a television reporter for KTVU, the Fox affiliate in the San Francisco Bay Area, was on his usual assignment. While Savage was reporting live on air about a train derailment in Alameda County in California, a car traveling at full speed was seen heading right towards him. The reporter was on the sidewalk and was so engrossed in his report that he couldn't hear the sound of the car honking and wheels screeching. Fortunately, Chip, his photographer, managed to signal to him on time, and he was able to escape from the scene just as the vehicle zoomed past where he was previously standing. The impact of the crash sent the camera pointing in the other direction, showing the damage from the car, and Savage's voice could be heard audibly shaken by the unpleasant event. You can see the car hit a light stand, as Alex and Chip shouted from the background, confirming that they were okay. Cars aren't the only threats to reporters working outdoors, though. Sometimes it's a helicopter. WNBC chopper crashed on live TV. At about 6:20 p.m., the WNBC crew was preparing to air a live report from a shooting scene in East Flatbush. Suddenly, Chopper 4 began a sharp nosedive movement. However, pilot Russ Cowrie was able to control and recover from the dive, leveling the chopper for a short moment. Unfortunately, the chopper's nose was raised and it swiftly changed direction to the left. It then continued a slow sequence of leftward spins, with the nose rising to about 60 degrees from the level at one point before it continued to wind downward. Chopper 4 then began to roll, hitting a 4-story residential building on its way down and cutting off its tail boom completely. Somehow, the passenger compartment continued the roll and crashed right side up on the roof of a close-by building. In the middle of the chaos, reporter Andrew Torres and pilot trainee Hassan Tan were able to detach themselves from the cabin. After a while, first responders managed to pull Maori from the pieces of the chopper, all without sustaining any injuries. The crashed Chopper 4 was previously owned by Helinet Aviation Services in Van Nuys, California, and the 3 crew members on board were employees of the aviation company. Thankfully, the reporter, pilot, and pilot trainee on board survived the crash and were taken to a hospital close by to confirm that they were okay. Accidents on live TV are strange and all, but what's stranger than a glitch in the Matrix caught on camera? Pope Francis vanished into thin air. On April 13, 2020, Pope Francis presented the Regina Coeli prayer from the Vatican on the day preceding Easter Sunday. The moment came in the middle of the earlier months of the COVID-19 pandemic. The prayer appeared to be aired live and was later made available on the internet for viewers to access. His prayer was also broadcast by several media agencies across the globe. However, when you look closely at the video, you will notice the Pope disappearing for a brief moment after turning his back to the audience, which a lot of people consider to be quite spooky. However, some viewers claimed that it was nothing more than a video editing error. After a close examination of the full footage of the prayer, it's pretty clear that Pope Francis did not disappear into thin air, as people thought he did. This particular video has caused people to question if it is some kind of weird light trick or cinematography display. For some, though, it was probably a hologram of the Pope and not the man himself. The Bradford City Stadium fire. May 11, 1985. The match between Bradford City and Lincoln City on May 11, 1985 started in a very celebratory mood. After all, the home team already won the 3rd Division Championship trophy, and this match was just supposed to cap the league. No one could have predicted that the stadium would erupt in flames just 40 minutes into the game. You see, although the Bradford Stadium looked okay on the outside, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and had been that way for a long time. Over the years, heaps of rubbish had accumulated under the seats, stacks of garbage Garbage, food wraps, and plastic containers were all tucked underneath the seats, and it kept piling up until that very day. Several times, safety experts had called the attention of the government to the dangers posed by the stadium, but there wasn't really anything they could do but demolish the entire building. That was supposed to happen days after the match, so this was more of a send-forth for both the league and the stadium. However, 5 minutes before halftime, the commentators started to see signs of a fire around Block G. At first, everyone thought it was just a guy lighting a cigarette, but as it would later turn out, someone actually dropped a lit cigarette under the stand, starting a fire that would eventually consume the stadium. Thanks to the heap of rubbish under the seats, the fire had more than enough fuel to keep going, and as it got more and more intense, you can hear the commentators getting uncomfortable in their booth. Because the game was being broadcast live, everyone watching could see the disaster as it unfolded, and with 6,000 spectators present, it soon became a huge tragedy. At the end of the day, 56 people were pronounced dead, while over 250 sustained serious injuries.